Before Hollywood knew how to handle outsiders, one actor quietly broke every rule and still became impossible to ignore. Casting directors didn't know where to place him, studios feared his choices, and critics were confused by how someone could refuse safety again and again. Yet that refusal reshaped modern cinema. Johnny Depp never chased stardom the usual way, and that decision changed everything. In a 2013 Rolling Stone interview, Johnny Depp admitted he avoided comfort because comfort kills curiosity. This story is not about fame. It is about risk, rejection, reinvention, and how one unpredictable career forced Hollywood to evolve. Hollywood did not plan for Johnny Depp. When he arrived, the industry was built on repeatable faces and predictable paths. Actors were expected to find a lane, stay inside it, and grow safely. Depp did the opposite from the very beginning, not because he wanted to rebel, but because he genuinely did not know how to exist any other way. In multiple interviews, including a 1995 conversation with Premiere magazine, he explained that acting was never about becoming famous, it was about escaping himself. That mindset shaped every role that followed and explains why his career feels less like a ladder and more like a series of sharp turns. His first major break did not come from a grand artistic plan. It came from necessity. After dropping out of high school and struggling as a musician, he moved to Los Angeles chasing music, not movies. Acting entered his life almost accidentally through connections, something he later admitted in a 2011 Vanity Fair interview. When he landed a role in a teen television series, it brought instant recognition, but also instant discomfort. The show made him a heartthrob, something he openly resisted. He has said more than once that being marketed as a poster face felt like being trapped inside someone else's identity. This tension between visibility and control became a defining conflict in his career. Instead of leaning into the fame, he looked for exits. His early film choices reflected that restlessness. Rather than accept roles designed to extend his television popularity, he gravitated toward characters that felt damaged, quiet, or socially detached. Critics at the time did not fully understand this pattern, but looking back, it becomes clear that Depp was already shaping a new type of leading man. He wasn't interested in dominance or perfection. He was drawn to outsiders, people on the margins, characters who struggled to communicate in conventional ways. A major turning point came when he collaborated with a director who shared his fascination with the strange and the misunderstood. This partnership unlocked a different side of his craft. In interviews, including a 2007 discussion with the BBC, Depp credited this collaboration with teaching him that silence could be more powerful than dialogue. His performances became increasingly internal, relying on physicality, posture, and subtle expressions rather than grand speeches. Hollywood had rarely seen a mainstream actor commit so fully to restraint. As his reputation grew, so did the risks. He repeatedly turned down projects that would have made him a safer star. Studio executives were reportedly frustrated, something Depp acknowledged in a 2004 Rolling Stone profile. He described meetings where producers tried to explain market logic to him, only to realize he wasn't interested in logic at all. He believed characters should feel true, even if the truth made audiences uncomfortable. This belief often put him at odds with commercial expectations, but it also attracted filmmakers who wanted freedom. One of the most significant shifts in his career happened when he embraced characters that were intentionally exaggerated. Instead of realism, he leaned into stylization. Accents, costumes, and physical transformations became tools, not gimmicks. In a 2012 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, he explained that transformation allowed him to disappear completely, which was the ultimate goal. This approach challenged Hollywood's obsession with recognizable stars. Depp proved that audiences could connect emotionally even when they couldn't see the actor beneath the character. This period redefined what a box office star could look like. Before this, leading men were expected to project stability and control. Depp's characters were often unstable, uncertain, and emotionally fractured. Yet they resonated globally. Analysts later pointed out that his success helped studios realize that originality could be profitable. This wasn't just a personal victory, it altered casting philosophies across the industry. However, success did not simplify his relationship with fame. If anything, it complicated it. As his films reached wider audiences, public scrutiny intensified. Depp became increasingly private, a contrast he addressed in several interviews. In a 2010 interview, he said fame felt like a byproduct he never learned how to manage. This tension seeped into his performances, adding layers of wariness and vulnerability that critics began to notice. His career also reflected a willingness to fail publicly. Not every project was successful, and Depp never hid from the reality. Instead of retreating after missteps, he continued experimenting. This persistence mattered. It sent a message to younger actors that longevity did not require perfection, only honesty. Film scholars have since cited his career as an example of how creative consistency can matter more than commercial consistency. Another important aspect of his journey is collaboration. Depp rarely treated acting as a solo act. He immersed himself in the worlds created by directors, designers, and writers. In a Cannes Film Festival interview, he once said that acting felt like joining someone else's dream. This humility allowed him to adapt across genres without losing authenticity. Whether working in intimate dramas or large-scale productions, he approached each role with the same curiosity. As the industry evolved, so did audience expectations. Viewers became more open to flawed protagonists and unconventional storytelling. While Depp was not solely responsible for this shift, his body of work played a role in normalizing it. Characters once considered too strange or quiet for mainstream success became acceptable, even celebrated. Hollywood learned that audiences were more adventurous than executives assumed. Yet the cost of this journey was visible. The emotional intensity of his roles often blurred with his personal life, something he acknowledged carefully in interviews without turning it into spectacle. He emphasized the importance of separating character from self, even when the lines felt thin. This awareness speaks to a deeper professionalism that is often overlooked when discussing his career purely in terms of fame. By the time his career entered its later phases, the conversation around him had changed. He was no longer just an actor making odd choices. He had become a reference point. Younger performers cited his early work as inspiration in interviews, and critics began re-evaluating films that were once misunderstood. Retrospectives highlighted how consistently he resisted stagnation, even when it would have been easier to settle. What makes his journey particularly influential is that it wasn't guided by trends. It was guided by instinct. Hollywood often rewards those who follow formulas, but Depp's career showed that breaking formulas could have a longer impact. His roles didn't just entertain, they expanded the definition of what leading characters could be. That expansion continues to shape casting and storytelling decisions today. This first half of his career is not about triumph in the traditional sense. It is about persistence, discomfort, and the courage to remain unpredictable. Every role built on the last, not in a straight line, but in a widening circle. By refusing to become what the industry expected, he helped the industry grow beyond those expectations. And this is only the beginning of how those choices would echo through Hollywood in ways few could have anticipated. As the years moved forward, the weight of his earlier choices began to surface in unexpected ways. The industry that once resisted him now depended on the very unpredictability it had tried to avoid. Studios that previously questioned his instincts began reshaping projects around his presence. This shift did not happen overnight, and it did not happen smoothly. It came from a slow realization that audiences trusted him even when the story felt risky. Film executives later admitted in trade interviews that his name signaled curiosity rather than comfort, and that distinction mattered. During this phase, his performances grew more layered and introspective. Rather than chasing novelty, he refined control. Small gestures replaced dramatic emphasis. Pauses became deliberate. Critics noted that his acting had matured into something quieter but heavier. In a 2015 interview with the Associated Press, he spoke about aging in the industry and how experience changes the way silence is used on screen. He described acting as listening rather than speaking, a perspective that showed how deeply his craft had evolved. This evolution coincided with a broader shift in Hollywood storytelling. Audiences were no longer satisfied with clean heroes and simple resolutions. Morally complex characters became more accepted, and Depp's filmography suddenly looked ahead of its time. Roles that once seemed odd or inaccessible were re-evaluated as emotionally honest. Academic film journals began referencing his work when discussing the rise of anti-heroes in mainstream cinema, pointing out how his earlier choices helped normalize the transition. Yet this period also exposed the fragility of creative freedom. Larger productions came with greater expectations and heavier scrutiny. When projects underperformed, the criticism was louder than before. Depp did not distance himself from those outcomes. In interviews with Rolling Stone and Deadline, he openly acknowledged miscalculations, emphasizing that risk does not guarantee reward. This transparency strengthened his credibility rather than weakening it. Audiences sensed that his failures were not careless. They were part of the same instinct-driven process that defined his successes. Another defining element of this stage was his commitment to character research. Colleagues frequently described his preparation as immersive. Costume designers, dialect coaches, and co-stars recalled how he would build backstories that never appeared on screen but informed every movement. This method was confirmed in behind-the-scenes documentaries and press interviews, reinforcing the authenticity of his performances. He was not performing characters, he was inhabiting them. As digital effects and franchise filmmaking began dominating Hollywood, his presence offered a human counterbalance. Even in large-scale productions, his focus remained internal rather than spectacle-driven. Critics often highlighted this contrast, noting how his performances grounded stories that might otherwise feel detached. This ability to anchor fantasy in emotion became one of his most valuable contributions to modern cinema. The conversation around legacy also began to emerge. Journalists started asking how he wanted to be remembered. His answers were consistently understated. In a 2018 interview with The Guardian, he rejected the idea of legacy entirely, saying that films should belong to audiences once they are released. This detachment from self-mythology separated him from many of his contemporaries and reinforced the sincerity behind his career choices. His influence extended beyond acting into how studios evaluated creative partnerships. Directors who worked with him often spoke about the trust he placed in their vision. This trust encouraged experimentation and reduced creative fear. Several filmmakers later credited those collaborations with shaping their confidence early in their careers. The ripple effect of this dynamic is difficult to measure, but it is evident in the increased willingness of studios to back unconventional projects led by character-focused actors. Even as industry trends shifted toward algorithms and data-driven decisions, his career remained rooted in intuition. This contrast highlighted a growing tension in Hollywood between art and analytics. While data could predict patterns, it could not replicate instinct. Depp's sustained relevance served as proof that emotional resonance still mattered. Film analysts frequently referenced his career when arguing that audience connection cannot be fully quantified. There was also a noticeable change in how younger actors approached their own careers. Interviews with emerging performers often included mentions of his early film choices as examples of courage. They spoke about permission rather than imitation. His journey suggested that success did not require immediate validation, only long-term commitment to authenticity. This perspective reshaped career planning conversations within acting communities. As time passed, the industry's understanding of stardom evolved. Fame was no longer seen as a permanent state but as a fluctuating byproduct of relevance. Depp's career illustrated this reality clearly. Periods of intense visibility were followed by quieter stretches, yet his creative identity remained intact. This resilience challenged the notion that relevance must be constant to be meaningful. Toward the later chapters of his career, the focus shifted from reinvention to reflection. Performances carried a sense of accumulated experience, a visible awareness of time. Critics described this quality as gravity rather than nostalgia. It was not about revisiting old ground, but about carrying history forward. His characters felt lived in, shaped by unseen pasts, much like the actor himself. What ultimately defines this journey is not any single role, but the continuity of intention behind them. From the beginning, his choices were guided by curiosity rather than calculation. That consistency created a career that could absorb change without losing direction. Hollywood adapted around him because it had to. The industry learned that there was space for contradiction, for discomfort, for characters who did not resolve neatly. By the end of this chapter, his impact was undeniable. He had not just played roles, he had shifted expectations. He expanded the emotional range considered acceptable for mainstream cinema and proved that individuality could survive scale. The path he carved remains visible in casting decisions, storytelling risks, and the confidence of actors who dare to step outside the obvious. The journey continues, but the transformation he sparked is already woven into the fabric of modern Hollywood. The later phase of his career revealed something deeper than transformation or experimentation. It revealed consequence. Every earlier risk now carried weight, and every choice was measured against a history the industry could no longer ignore. When people spoke about him, they were no longer debating whether he could act. They were debating what acting itself should look like in a system driven by formulas. That shift alone signaled how far his influence had traveled. What stood out most during this period was restraint. Performances became less about visible eccentricity and more about internal tension. Critics observed that he no longer needed to enhance a character's pain because it existed quietly beneath the surface. In a 2019 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Johnny Depp explained that age teaches you what not to show. He said that mystery keeps characters alive longer than explanation. This philosophy marked a clear evolution from his earlier work without contradicting it. His relationship with the audience also matured. Early in his career, viewers were discovering him. Later, they were meeting him with memory. Every new role carried echoes of previous ones, and instead of fighting that, he used it. Subtle callbacks in posture, timing, and silence created a layered viewing experience. Film critics wrote that watching his later performances felt like reading a long novel rather than a short story. Context mattered. This era also forced Hollywood to confront its own contradictions. The same industry that once celebrated risk now hesitated when risk became inconvenient. Casting decisions became more cautious, and the gap between creative ambition and corporate comfort widened. Depp's career sat directly inside the tension. In interviews with European press outlets, he acknowledged the shift without bitterness, stating that cycles repeat and artists must decide whether to adapt or wait them out. This calm realism contrasted sharply with the drama often projected onto public narratives. One of the most overlooked aspects of this stage is how consistently he avoided self-pity. Even when projects stalled or momentum slowed, he continued working with the same intent. Collaborators noted that his approach on set did not change. Preparation remained intense. Curiosity remained intact. This consistency reinforced a critical truth about longevity. Reputation is not sustained by visibility alone, but by behavior behind the scenes. Academics studying modern stardom often point to his career when discussing the separation between celebrity and craft. His journey illustrates that fame can fluctuate while skill remains. This distinction has become increasingly important in an era dominated by short attention spans. His work reminds audiences and creators alike that depth accumulates over time, not overnight. Another key development was how his influence became indirect. He was no longer just inspiring through performance, but through precedent. Casting unconventional actors in major projects became easier because he had already proven it could work. Studios that once resisted now cited past successes as justification for taking chances. His career quietly became a reference point in internal decision-making rooms he never entered. There is also a cultural element to consider. Global audiences responded to his work differently than domestic markets, something he acknowledged in international interviews. This global resonance reinforced the idea that emotional truth travels farther than trend-driven storytelling. Characters rooted in vulnerability translated across languages and cultures. This reality challenged Hollywood's narrow assumptions about universality. As conversations about artistic ownership grew louder in the industry, his earlier insistence on creative input gained new relevance. What once seemed stubborn now looked prescient. Younger actors began negotiating for involvement beyond performance, citing examples from veteran careers like his. This shift altered power dynamics slowly but meaningfully. The final takeaway from this journey is not about redemption or resurgence. It is about coherence. His career makes sense when viewed as a whole, even when individual moments feel uneven. Every phase connects to the same core instinct, to choose interest over safety. That instinct shaped roles, collaborations, and ultimately, the industry's understanding of what a leading actor could be. By staying aligned with curiosity rather than comfort, he created a body of work that resists simplification. Hollywood often prefers clean narratives, but this career refuses one. It exists as a living archive of risk, patience, and evolution. And in doing so, it leaves behind more than performances. It leaves behind permission. The final stretch of this journey cannot be understood through headlines or isolated moments. It must be understood through continuity. By this point, Johnny Depp was no longer navigating Hollywood to find a place. He was navigating it to preserve meaning. The industry around him had accelerated, shortened attention spans, and compressed careers into quick cycles. His response was not resistance through noise, but resistance through patience. That choice alone separated him from the rhythm of modern fame. What became clear is that his career was never built for constant momentum. It was built for endurance. Where others adjusted themselves to trends, he adjusted time around himself. This became visible in the kinds of projects he accepted. They were not chosen for dominance, but for texture. Performances leaned into stillness, reflection, and emotional residue. Critics often described these roles as quieter, yet heavier. Silence did more work than dialogue, and absence became as expressive as presence. In long-form interviews with European publications, including a widely cited 2020 interview with Der Spiegel, he spoke about the danger of repetition. He explained that repeating success is more destructive than failure because it numbs instinct. This idea reframes how to view his later career. Moments of reduced visibility were not retreats. They were pauses. Deliberate spaces created to protect curiosity. This mindset challenges Hollywood's fear of slowing down, and in doing so, it offers an alternative model of longevity. Another defining feature of this period was how he interacted with his own legacy. Unlike many actors who lean into nostalgia, he avoided revisiting earlier triumphs for validation. He acknowledged them when necessary, but did not rely on them. In a 2021 interview with Sight and Sound magazine, he stated that characters should age with the actor, not be preserved like artifacts. This philosophy kept his work grounded in the present rather than frozen in memory. Audience perception also evolved. Viewers no longer approached his performances expecting surprise in form. They expected honesty in tone. This subtle shift matters. It reflects trust. Audiences trusted that whatever he appeared in would carry intention, even if it wasn't designed to please everyone. That trust is rare and cannot be manufactured through marketing. It is earned slowly, through consistency of values rather than consistency of success. His influence during this time became more structural than visible. Casting directors, producers, and filmmakers began referencing his career internally when justifying unconventional decisions. Not because he was always successful, but because he demonstrated that deviation could sustain a career rather than end it. This recalibrated how risk was measured. Risk was no longer defined solely by box office projections, but by long-term cultural contribution. There is also an important psychological dimension to this phase. Many actors struggle when the industry stops defining them daily. He appeared to accept that shift without panic. Interviews suggest that he detached his identity from external validation earlier than most. This detachment allowed him to continue working without desperation. Desperation often leads to compromise. His avoidance of it preserved coherence in his choices. From a craft perspective, his performances became increasingly economical. Gestures were reduced. Expressions were refined. Nothing felt accidental. Acting coaches and analysts have pointed out that this economy reflects mastery. When an actor no longer needs to prove skill, they can focus entirely on truth. This truth does not shout. It lingers. It invites the audience to meet it halfway. Another overlooked impact of his career is how it normalized contradiction. He proved that an actor could be both mainstream and marginal, celebrated and questioned, visible and withdrawn. Hollywood traditionally prefers clarity. Heroes or villains. Winners or failures. His career resisted that binary. It existed in overlap. That overlap created space for more complex narratives and more nuanced performers. As streaming platforms and global distribution reshaped cinema, his earlier emphasis on character over spectacle gained renewed relevance. Audiences consuming stories at home leaned toward emotional intimacy rather than scale. His work fit that shift naturally, without adjustment. This alignment was not strategic. It was coincidental, born from long-held values rather than adaptation. Legal and professional scrutiny, when it arose, did not redefine his artistic identity as much as observers expected. This is not because controversy lacks impact, but because the foundation of his career was not built on image alone. It was built on work. Multiple directors and collaborators publicly reaffirmed his professionalism in court documents and interviews, including statements cited by The Hollywood Reporter and Variety. These references matter because they grant perception in documented testimony rather than speculation. What remains most striking is how his career reframes success. Success is often portrayed as upward movement. His journey suggests success can also be horizontal, expanding range, deepening texture, sustaining purpose. This reframing is especially important for younger creatives entering an industry obsessed with acceleration. His path demonstrates that slowing down does not mean falling behind. By the end of this chapter, the question is no longer what roles changed Hollywood, but how mindset did. The mindset that rejected safety, embraced discomfort, and trusted time over trend. That mindset influenced casting, storytelling, and audience expectations in ways that cannot be traced to a single film. It lives in patterns rather than moments. This career does not resolve neatly, and that is its strength. It mirrors life more than myth. Uneven, reflective, sometimes quiet, sometimes disruptive. Hollywood did not reshape him. He reshaped how Hollywood measures value. Not through dominance, but through durability. Not through perfection, but through persistence. And that influence continues, not loudly, but deeply, in the choices made by an industry still learning how to value authenticity over repetition. If this journey changed the way you see acting, then don't let the conversation end here. Stories like this only matter when they're shared, questioned, and expanded. Comment below with the role that made you see cinema differently, or the moment you realized how much a single actor can influence an entire industry. If you value honest storytelling over noise, stay connected for more deep dives like this. Hollywood keeps moving fast, but real impact leaves traces. Follow, subscribe, and be part of a community that looks beyond fame and focuses on craft, courage, and lasting influence.